But I understand that there's going to be an opportunity for questions. We can open it up to questions. Is that right, Jim?
That's correct.
Okay, so I'm happy to talk to you about anything, anything you want to talk about in terms of what's going on in Washington, some of the experiences that we had, and I'm happy to go down whatever path you want to go down, whether it be Illinois, whether it be education, whether it be infrastructure, whether it's energy, another thing that I think is vitally important for us. These are things that I think, again, will help enable Illinois and the United States to get more globally competitive. Who's got some questions? Yes, sir.
Illinois has more coal than Saudi Arabia has oil. What can we do to bring coal back online as a source of power? Is that
The question is that Illinois has more coal than Saudi Arabia has oil. What can we do to bring coal back in line so that we can, again, talk about energy and making ourselves more energy independent? So as we talk about, again, finding the common ground, and by the way, thank you for your service to our country, I appreciate that. As we talk about common ground, we want, and I think you're going to find both sides of the aisle will be happy to say we want to become more energy independent as a nation. What I would say in terms of at least what I've talked about in the past is that we should give a green light in our tax code for wind, solar, geothermal, some of these new advances that are coming online with regard to energy. Many of them are inefficient today, but let's at least encourage them that we want them to continue to invent. Right? We want to continue to that next new thing. So that would be one. Second thing I would say is that, with regard to the shale that's all over the country, let's try to do it in an environmentally responsible manner. We've got trillions of cubic feet of natural gas, not to mention coal, in the New Albany Shale Reserve in southern Illinois alone. Trillions of cubic feet. Now we have to be able to find a way to harness that in a way that is environmentally responsible, is good for jobs, and allows us to be able to harness that energy. We have to be able to allow the rigs that are sitting out in the Gulf of Mexico now to be able to go after the oil that's there. So give us a thumbs up or thumbs down, part of the proposal that was made in Congress, the Department of Energy, or I'm sorry, the Department of the Interior, to say yes or no on the oil leases. And I think that we ought to give them an opportunity to get more of that oil because we're going to have a tremendous, China's looking for that oil, a lot of folks are looking for that oil, we've got it right here, let's try to capture that. So those are just some of the things that, as I look out there, where we can find some of that common ground in terms of energy policy. So these are things that I think are very, very important. It speaks to, again, jobs here in our country. It also talks about energy independence and doing so in a smart way. Yes, ma'am.
Going along the same lines, what's stopping us from, taking advantage of the solar and the wind? I mean, there was a big move in the 70s, and it seemed to get killed, and it seemed to go again, and now it seems to be depressed again. What exactly is stopping us?
Well, I think what's stopping the solar and the wind?
The exploration, using that more often.
Well, I think part of it is we saw that at the end of this last year that the tax credit for wind was going about. So most of the tax credits for these were going to end in 2012 and 2013. And so, again, I was an advocate, let's renew those to give them a green light. Because for those that have conduct businesses, if the tax credit for those goes away, and they know they were going away, you stop that production a lot earlier. And so that's one of the things that's out there. But also, I am not an advocate for instance, the Solyndra types, where the government is actually trying to play in the private equity business where they're picking the winners and losers. We ought to allow the tax code and to give the tax credits to those that are out there that are trying to move the needle on wind and solar and allow them to have those benefits.
So that's something Congress would have to vote on, is what you're saying, right?
It would be something that Congress has to vote on. Yes, sir.
Bob, when you reflect on your time in Washington, who were some of the bright lights on the Democratic and Republican side of it? Who are people we should be knowing about around the country that actually cooperate and think
Sure.
together?
So the question was who are some of the bright lights on the Democratic and Republican side of the aisle, and who are some of the folks that work together? Certainly, I enjoyed working together with a number of folks on the other side of the aisle. I sat down with certainly members of the Illinois delegation, a good number of them. First piece of legislation that I sponsored was the Great Lakes Water Protection Act with Dan Lipinski. It happened to be also sponsored by Mark Kirk and Dick Durbin, so we had, again, bipartisan, bicameral legislation there. But I would say it depends on what the topic is, Jerry. So there are those that would be very much passionate, whether it be in foreign affairs, Iran sanctions, something that I worked on with Ted Deutsch in terms of the sanction legislation that was passed. That was one of the pieces of legislation that I worked on, that my language in terms of the sanctions on energy was put into a broader bill with Ileana Ross-Layton, who again is someone that I would point to as a good one. I would say John Carney on the Financial Services Committee, Democrat from Delaware, is someone that I think is good and can work with very well. But there's a lot of folks on the other side of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats alike, that are willing to come together and work. Good number of folks in the Tuesday group, of which I was a member, are considered to be the more moderate Republicans. And then there's those on the other side that we would work with that are also what they call the blue dogs. What's unfortunate is that there are fewer and fewer folks that are in the middle, because they're the top targets from the other side. Republicans will target the blue dog Democrats. Democrats are going to target the moderate Republicans. The redistricting process, as we've just gone through in the census, I would also point to as one of the problems that we have with the system, and I think that it's needs to be refined. I'll just say that. Any other questions that people have? Yes, Jessica.
A comment, because I, having been Winnetka Village president, while this wonderful leader was our representative of the 10th district, I just wanted to put out a compliment, because such an outstanding leader who reached out to his municipal, local elected officials and really kept us informed and engaged, and had conference calls to let us know what was going on in Washington and listen to us. And communication is such a big piece of it as to what's going on in your boots on the ground approach, to know what's going on in your district and what the concerns are of your constituents is really a challenge for all of us in government. And I just have to applaud you for what you did, because you were fantastic. So thank you so much for your service.
Any other questions or comments like that are great too. Take more of those. Yes, sir.
So there are a number of people who are in Washington or at the state level who seem reasonable. You describe things that we want to come together on the other side of the aisle, and it seems like those aren't the people that are going to be able to flourish because of the extremes on either side. If you're a Democrat or Republican, the extremes tend to rise because of whatever reason, money or influence or pressure, whatever it might be. What do you think it will take until we can figure out a way to get more people who are willing to work together to make something happen? Because it seems like it's going the wrong way.
Did everybody hear that? Okay, good, because that's a long one to repeat. I think one of the problems that we have throughout the country is if we look at the redistricting process, and this is one of the things that I've said, if the Republicans are in charge, the Republicans want to create a lock Republican district. That means there's no way in the world anybody but a Republican is going to get elected. When the Democrats are in charge, they want to do the same on the other side. They want to create what we call a locked Democratic district. And frankly, what we have then is people that are worried not about the general election. They're worried only about the primary election. It's like running for mayor in the city of Chicago. Do you think anybody cares about the general election? Whoever wins the Democratic primary for the city of Chicago mayor is going to be the next mayor of the city of Chicago, and they're going to take that time between the primary election and the general to plan the party. Right? So in essence, what we have is we have people that will run to one extreme. They'll run to the left or they'll run to the right in order to please the primary base. And who ends up losing, I think, is the general electorate at the end. So unless we figure out a way to have those more 50-50 districts, or for instance, let me just ask you, do you think let's take an R+5, that means a Republican would be favored by 5 percentage points in a generic ballot. Take that district. In an R+5, do you think you're going to have someone that's gonna be more in the middle as a Republican or a Democrat? What do you think? Democrat. I think you're right, because the Democrat's gonna have to go over and work with the Republicans to say, hey, what is it that we can be doing? So again, we're gonna have to figure out that method, because again, how we draw the maps, who is represented, and if we just, and again, don't take Illinois, take another state, and how they drew the maps. Illinois is, take a look at those boundaries in those districts, it's interesting, how those were drawn, but they've got that down to a science. But I do think that again, what is the community, what is the audience that we have within the group will make a difference. So if you want more people to come together, you've got to have it palatable for them to do so. Meaning that, again, people are saying, I want you to work together. And look, we take a look at, people said, listen, we want to end the gridlock. And in Massachusetts, Scott Brown lost, and Elizabeth Warren was elected. Now, Scott Brown was a bridge builder in the United States Senate, right? I mean, he was the one that was actually straddling the aisle, and he was the one that was reaching across the aisle to the Democrats. The voters said, not a chance. They said, we want Elizabeth Warren. So you're going to take, I think you're taking a big step backwards on the bipartisanship as that being an example. And there are examples on the other side of the aisle as well. So that's part of the problem that we have. Yes?
Along the lines of what Barry had asked, do you see that there is any political will for supporting what we would call a truly open primary like Nebraska has, where there's not a Republican or a Democratic, it's the primary, and 85 people can run, and the two top finishers have the general election? It seems to work pretty well in Nebraska, where and they only have one house, so
Yeah.
Everything works a little bit differently, but it seems as though if a vote is based on, I'm going to catch it at home in primary, do you eliminate the threat of losing your base politically if you open it up a little bit to appeal to both sides?
Sure. So the question was on open primaries, like what happens in Nebraska. Would that work? Would that be, and again, that's going to be up to the voters. And I do believe in local government and trying to get people that what may work well in one state might not work well in another. What may work well in a township might not work, well in the other township or other communities. We saw that same thing happen in California. They changed their system out there. And so actually the two top vote getters might be two Democrats. And actually, you had, and oftentimes a more moderate Democrat won the general election. So that may be something that happens. I don't know. The jury's still out on those, and we'll see how those shake out. So listen, I think we're at our time limit. Jin's giving me the hook, but what I do want to do is I want to thank you so much for participating in township government, participating in our community, because the greater participation you have in your community, the better community it's going to be. It was the honor of my life to be able to represent you in the United States Congress, and I thank you for your trust, and I look forward to working with you all in the future. Thanks so much.